So continuing in what seems to be a series of character combos that kill a Primarch, who can happily turn him inside out from a very safe distance. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're taking a second look at the Grey Knight's super smart Librarian, who on average can hand out 11 mortal wounds in a single psychic phase, if not more. I did briefly touch on this guy on a video about Grey Knight's combos in the new codex, but as a few people pointed out down in the comments, I did get one rule wrong, and I actually missed a way that he could cast even more mortal wounds in the same combo. I thought he'd get on average 8 mortal wounds, it turns out that he can average a comfortable 11. That's truly apocalyptic psychic potential for a relatively cheap investment in a character plus a few command points. In the video we'll talk quickly about the combo and the setup and how it works, average damage outputs, and a few more thoughts as to its strength and limitations. So of course our damage dealer is a standard Grey Knight's Terminator Librarian. He's 145 points in the new codex and does have a fairly respectable stat line in his own right. He only hits on 3s, but with 5 wounds, 4 attacks, a decent melee weapon, and he can pick up a 5-point Storm Bolter if he wants one. The interesting thing that I missed about the Grey Knight Librarian is that he can actually take psychic powers freely between the Dominus and the Sanctic discipline, the two ones that the Grey Knights have access to. He's one of the only models that can take powers from both, and unlike quite a lot of previous codexes, he's not just locked to one discipline, he can freely mix and match between the two. That means that we can take one from Dominus, one from Sanctic, and he can normally cast 2 per turn. For powers he has access to, he does of course get Smite like most other Psykers in the game. Then we've got Vortex of Doom, a Warp Charge 7/1 with a 12-inch range, and that does 2d3 mortal wounds and 1 to every enemy unit within 3 inches. As psychic powers for mortal wounds go, it's one of the most efficient in the entire game. Then he can chase that down with Purifying Flame, one from the Sanctic discipline that's Warp Charge 5, 9-inch range, and normally deals a flat 3 mortal wounds, or a big d3 plus 3 if you cast it on an 11+, similar to how Smite gets a damage increase. So if we take those powers on him, then we can combine that with a Warlord trait Psychic Epitome. This one's a +1 bonus to mortal wounds per Witchfire. That does only affect the Witchfire spells. As was corrected before, Smite is not actually a Witchfire. Still though, an extra couple of mortal wounds to stack with all the rest is no bad thing at all. Then we come to stratagems. You can pay 1 command point to cast 1 extra psychic power. If it were me, I would cast the big 2 first, and then go on to Smite last if I needed it. I guess there is at least a fair chance you might just obliterate whatever you cast at first, and not have to use it unless there's no other choice. Then there's also a stratagem for a 1 command point, and that one extends the range of psychic powers by 6 inches, which is really quite important for this guy, because it means that he can cast Purifying Flame straight out of Deep Strike, which he wouldn't normally be able to do without the damage boost. As a Grey Knight Terminator Librarian, you can put him in Teleport Strike for free, have him turn up somewhere within 15-inch range of the enemy, then hit them with all 3 spells at once, and hopefully hoover them straight off the battlefield. Of course there is always the chance that you might fail one, particularly the Warp Charge 7 Vortex of Doom, and I think with this much investment it might well be worth just safeguarding that you get at least 1 decent turn of Psychic out of him. Grey Knights also have a 1 command point stratagem to cast on 3d6 and drop the lowest dice. That makes you far more likely to cast a Warp Charge 7 power, and means that Smite and Purifying Flame should almost never fail. Otherwise there's a Wisdom of the Prognosticar upgrade called the Gem of Inoctu. That's 15 points for a once per game +2 to cast for a single psychic phase. Again, that could near guarantee that you get all 3 casts off, particularly if you have the potential to command point reroll if you do get super unlucky and he fails to cast one of them. So a little bit of extra investment there, 1 Warlord trait, and potentially up to 3 command points, though maybe just the 1 if you are going a bit cheaper or a bit riskier. Anyway, putting it all together, Vortex of Doom will average 4 on the 2d3, plus 1 for the Warlord trait, so 5, plus you get that bonus splash damage on any other enemy units nearby. Purifying Flame will get a flat 3 plus an extra 1 for 4, and a small chance to get d3 plus 3 damage if you roll an 11 or more. And Smite will give you an average of 2, or potentially a bit more if you do cast on a very high value. Adding that all up, it's a huge and 11 mortal wound damage punch, happily killing the Primarch of the Ultramarines, though of course he does have his chance of standing up again, easily obliterating the vast majority of normal sized characters and even most normal sized battle tanks, 3 or 4 Blade Guard veterans, or 11 single wound models. Unless your opponent has got some sort of innate defense against mortal wounds, this guy is pretty much a point and delete threat who can blast his prey just straight off the board. Other than those choices, there are a few other things that you could do with him. Plenty of options in the Grey Knight's Codex, but these are just a few of them that I like a lot. I think with this much damage on the table, it could easily be worth him coming down with a bit of a bodyguard, either some Terminators or Strike Marines, just to drop down and take a lot of bullets for him. Of course they can do plenty of threats in their own right as well, but with this kind of crazy mortal wound explosion on the table, even if they just take bullets for him and nothing else, it could still be worth it. As well as Teleport Strike, you could use Gate of Infinity from another character nearby to jump him round the table. It means that you could potentially get this mortal wound damage output on turn 1 if you really wanted, or potentially once he's struck, if he does manage to survive the turn, you could jump him off to another foe. As well as that, nothing in this is really reliant on Tides of the Warp either. It does mean that you could potentially run this Librarian as a small allied detachment with Grey Knights, and still get access to the basic combo. The way that the extra Warlord traits thing is worded these days does mean that if you wanted the Warlord trait, then your actual Warlord would have to be Grey Knights, but that might not be the worst thing in the world for some Imperial armies. It depends what other sort of options you're passing up. In any case, depending on what sort of bonuses you're losing for including allied Grey Knights, it seems hard to imagine that you can't get decent return on your value from one nice character like this, just to function as a ridiculously scary point and delete threat. Finally, the relic slot is free in the build, which means that you could take the Sigil of Exigence or something else. The Sigil of Exigence is the one that allows him to teleport away as soon as he's shot, giving your opponent no choice but to deal with him in close combat, otherwise he's just going to jump away, go somewhere safe, then either step forward and cast more powers next turn, or use another character to Gate of Infinity him straight back into the action. If this one's already in play on something else though, you could just hand him out the Relic Stormbolter for a little bit more threat with a bunch of Strength 5, AP -2, Damage 2 shooting, or one of the upgrades that ups his survivability, maybe that one for +1 to his save and a 5+ feel no pain. Could certainly help him stay on the board. So obviously I do think that he's very strong indeed, but I will bear in mind that he does have plenty of limitations, and is certainly not going to win a game all by himself. Those psychic powers could get denied, that could be really painful if you lose Vortex of Doom. In particular, he doesn't really want to be fighting against Sisters of Battle, who have that sacred right to deny the psychic powers on a 5+. Also, if the foe has any sort of mortal wound denying power, say like the feel no pain type saves you can often get on vehicles, it's almost always going to be worth it whenever he casts all this stuff, as your opponent knows for sure that they're going to be eating a crazy amount of mortal wounds, and any stratagem like that is almost certainly going to be effective. Once he's on the board, unless you do have something else to gate him around, he is going to be at least relatively slow moving and short ranged, though if you fire up all the stratagems again, his range isn't too terrible. He could move in advance and then cast all the powers at 15 inches, which I guess could be around about a 24-inch threat range or so. Finally, with Deep Strike, he's certainly at risk from being screened from his ideal targets, and the opponent would certainly want to be keeping their biggest hitters safe from this sort of carnage. He definitely could be made a fair bit less relevant if he's not able to set up in the right place, but his base isn't the biggest in the world, and they are going to have to screen out at least fairly carefully if they do want to avoid him. So anyway, let me know what you think of the Grey Knight Librarian. I'm kind of surprised that he's even scarier than I gave him credit for. Just on paper, that's a crazy amount of damage coming out of one cheap model. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly try and keep the regular 40k videos coming, and new ones come out virtually every day. Finally, if you have enjoyed the video and you'd like to help support, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.